Hello friends, my wife, Emily, and I have been together for 7 years, married for 4. We met in college, one of those cliché love-at-first-sight stories where we couldn't get enough of each other. She was always the kind of woman who lit up a room, charming, smart, and beautiful. People were drawn to her like moths to a flame. I always felt lucky to have her, to be the one she chose. Or at least, that's what I thought. Things had been off for a while, but I ignored the signs because that's what you do when you trust someone. You make excuses for them, you rationalize their behavior, and you tell yourself you're just being paranoid. It started with small things: Emily suddenly getting more into fashion, wearing expensive clothes that didn't fit our budget, getting her nails done every week, switching up her perfume, and always having her phone glued to her hand. I chalked it up to her just wanting to take better care of herself. She told me it was just a phase, that she wanted to feel good. And why would I question it? Every woman deserves to feel beautiful, right? Then came the business trips. She worked in marketing, and out of nowhere, she started traveling more. Before, she only had a few out-of-town meetings a year, but suddenly she was flying out every other weekend, always to places like New York, Miami, or Los Angeles. She told me she was climbing the corporate ladder, making big moves, networking. I believed her. I supported her. I was proud of her, but something felt off. She started treating me differently, like I was an afterthought. She was more distant, less affectionate. Our conversations turned into shallow small talk, and when I asked about her trips, her answers were vague. It was just meetings all day, she would say. Nothing exciting. But I could see the excitement in her eyes, the glow on her skin, the way she was suddenly texting late at night, smiling at her phone. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself she was just tired from work. Then the lies started piling up. One night, she told me she was staying late at the office for a big project. But when I called her desk phone, no one answered. I tried her cell, and she didn't pick up. Hours later, she came home, reeking of expensive cologne that wasn't mine. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off and told me one of her coworkers had hugged her goodbye after a meeting. "You're being ridiculous," she said. "Why are you acting so insecure?" That was her go-to line, gaslighting me into thinking I was the problem. That I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, but then came the biggest red flag of all. A couple of weeks ago, Emily got a brand new diamond bracelet. It wasn't just any bracelet, it was the kind of thing that cost thousands of dollars. I noticed it immediately because we weren't in a place financially where she could afford something like that. When I asked her where she got it, she hesitated, just for a split second, before telling me it was a gift from her company's CEO. "It's just a token of appreciation for all my hard work," she said with a smile, acting like it was no big deal. A CEO giving out diamond jewelry to employees? That didn't sit right with me. I asked more questions, trying to dig deeper, but she shut me down. "You're overthinking it," she said. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." But I knew. Deep down, I knew, and then, last week, I found the proof I needed. I wasn't even looking for it. I was just grabbing my laptop charger from her home office when I saw her iPad sitting on the desk, unlocked. Emily was always careful with her devices, always keeping them locked with Face ID, never letting me near them. But this time, she slipped up and curiosity got the best of me. I opened her messages, and what I found shattered me. There were dozens of texts, not to a coworker, not to a friend, but to someone named Richard. At first, I didn't recognize the name, but as I scrolled through their messages, it became clear. Richard was no ordinary man. He was a millionaire. A much older man, probably in his 60s, who lived in a penthouse in the city. And the texts weren't just casual conversations. They were explicit, intimate, full of details about expensive dinners, trips, gifts, things I had no idea about. She was living a double life, sneaking around behind my back while I sat at home like a fool, waiting for her to come back from her so-called business trips. She had chosen money over love, and I was about to confront her. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands shaking, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The messages kept coming, one after another, each one making my stomach drop lower and lower. She wasn't just cheating. She was living an entirely different life with him. Richard wasn't just some fling, some one-time mistake. He was a part of her world, a world I had never been invited into. Expensive hotel stays, luxury dinners, designer gifts, weekend trips to places I'd never even heard her mention before. She talked to him like he was the center of her universe, calling him darling, saying she missed him, telling him she couldn't wait to see him again. And the worst part? He responded in kind, calling her his love, promising her more jewelry, more lavish vacations, even mentioning something about a property in the south of France. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was caving in. How long had this been going on? How many nights had she come home to me after being with him? How many times had she smiled at me, kissed me, slept beside me, knowing she had just been in his bed? I felt sick. My head spun with every memory I had of her, every moment that now felt like a lie, every touch that meant nothing. My wife had sold herself to an old man with money. I scrolled further, looking for some kind of explanation, something that would make this less horrific, but it only got worse. She wasn't just seeing him. She was planning a future with him. There were messages where she talked about wanting to move in with him, about how she was tired of pretending, about how she knew she deserved more. More. That word echoed in my head. More than what? More than me. More than the life we had built together. More than the man who had been by her side for years, supporting her, loving her, doing everything I could to make her happy. Apparently, that wasn't enough. Apparently, what she really wanted was wealth, luxury, a life of ease handed to her on a silver platter by a man who had probably done this before with countless women just like her. And she fell for it. She let herself become just another plaything for some rich old man, and I was the fool who had no idea that I didn't realize I was gripping the edges of the desk so hard my knuckles had turned white. My breathing was shallow, my whole body tense, like I was on the verge of either breaking down or exploding. A part of me wanted to throw the iPad across the room, smash it into 1,000 pieces, destroy the evidence just so I didn't have to keep reading. But I couldn't stop. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, knowing it was going to be horrific but unable to look away. There were pictures. Of course, there were pictures. Selfies of her in hotels, smiling in robes, holding up glasses of champagne, posing in front of mirror walls in penthouses I had never seen before. She looked happy. Happier than she had in months. I stared at those pictures, trying to remember the last time she had smiled like that with me. I couldn't, and then, the final blow. A message she had sent just the night before, when she had told me she was too tired to talk and went to bed early. I can't wait until I don't have to pretend anymore. I want to wake up next to you every morning, not him. That was it. That was the moment I felt something inside me crack. Because up until that second, there was still a part of me clinging to hope, still telling myself maybe this was just a mistake, maybe there was an explanation, maybe she had gotten caught up in something she didn't know how to get out of. But no. She wanted this. She chose this. She wasn't planning on stopping. She was waiting for the right moment to leave, to drop me like a bad investment, to move on with her new life with her rich old boyfriend, without a second thought about what it would do to me. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind racing through every possible scenario, every way this could go. I could pretend I didn't see it, wait for her to come to me and break the news, let her think she had the upper hand. I could confront her immediately, throw the iPad in her face and demand answers. I could pack my bags and leave before she even got home, cut my losses and walk away before she had the chance to twist things, to make me feel like the bad guy for reacting to her betrayal. But none of those felt right. None of those felt like they would give me what I needed. I needed to see the look on her face when she realized she had been caught. I needed to hear her try to explain herself, to listen to her lies and watch her squirm. I needed to see if there was even a shred of guilt left in her, or if the woman I married was truly gone. So I waited. She came home late, as usual. The moment she walked through the door, I studied her like I was seeing her for the first time. The way she casually tossed her purse on the counter, kicked off her heels, stretched like she had spent a long, exhausting day working. She looked at me and smiled, like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't sleeping with another man, like she wasn't already planning a life without me. It made my blood boil. But I kept my cool. I asked her how her day was. She told me the same thing she always did. Oh, just meetings all day. So exhausting. Lies. All of it. Lies, falling from her lips so easily I wondered how long she had been perfecting them, and then I said it, "Who's Richard?" The shift in her expression was instant. A flicker of something crossed her face: panic, shock, a split second of fear, but then it was gone, replaced by confusion, a practiced, rehearsed innocence. "What?" she asked, tilting her head like I had just spoken another language. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. "Richard. Who is he?" She laughed, actually laughed, shaking her head like I was being ridiculous. "Babe, what are you talking about?" I pulled out the iPad, held it up, let her see the messages with her own eyes. Her face went pale, and in that moment, I knew she was about to lie again. I knew she was about to spin some story, try to gaslight me into believing something that wasn't true. But this time, I was ready. She didn't speak at first. Her eyes darted between me and the iPad, scanning the screen like she was trying to process just how badly she had been caught. I could see her mind working, her lips parting like she was about to say something before closing again, recalculating, shifting gears. And then, like clockwork, the mask slipped back on. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, crossed her arms over her chest like I was the one being unreasonable. "Are you seriously going through my messages now?" she said, her voice dripping with irritation, like I was some paranoid husband checking up on her without reason, like she wasn't standing there guilty as hell that I didn't respond. I just stared at her, waiting. I wanted to see how far she would take this, how long she would keep up the act before realizing she had no way out. She sighed, shaking her head like I was exhausting her. "It's not what you think," she said, her tone suddenly softer, playing the victim now. "Richard is just a friend. A mentor, really. He's been helping me with my career, introducing me to people, giving me opportunities." She reached for my hand, her touch light, careful. "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react like this." I pulled my hand away. "I wasn't playing this game." "You expect me to believe that?" I asked, my voice low, controlled. "That a 60-year-old millionaire is just your mentor? That all these gifts, these trips, the hotels, those are just part of your career?" I could see the flicker of frustration cross her face, the slight narrowing of her eyes, the realization that I wasn't going to just swallow whatever story she fed me. She exhaled, pressing her fingers to her temple like she was trying to keep her composure. "You're twisting things," she said, shaking her head. "Richard is just generous. He sees potential in me. He believes in me, in what I can achieve. He wanted to support me." "Support you how? By taking you to 5-star resorts? By buying you diamonds? By having you tell him you can't wait to wake up next to him instead of me?" Her jaw clenched. For a split second, I thought I saw real panic in her eyes, the realization that there was no way out of this, that I had read enough to know exactly what was happening. But she was too good at this. Too used to lying, too comfortable bending the truth to suit whatever version of reality worked best for her. "You don't understand," she said, her voice a little more desperate now. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Emily?" I snapped, stepping closer, forcing her to look at me. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that. It looks like you've been sneaking around behind my back with some old man who throws money at you. It looks like you've been planning to leave me for him. She hesitated. That was it. That pause, that half-second where she didn't immediately deny it. I saw it all over her face. I had been right. She was going to leave. She wasn't just cheating, she was done with me, just waiting for the right moment to walk away. And for what? A bigger bank account? A life of luxury? Had I ever really mattered to her, or was I just a stepping stone to something better? She exhaled sharply, shaking her head again, but this time, there was no more faked innocence, no more attempts at gaslighting me into thinking I was crazy. She knew the act was over. Now, she was just trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. I was going to tell you, she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. I needed more time. I let out a bitter laugh. More time for what? For things to be settled. For everything to be in place. She wouldn't look at me now. Richard, he has plans. He wants to take care of me. Give me things you can't. And there it was. The final blow. I could have handled the affair. I could have handled the lies, the betrayal, the fact that she had been sneaking around behind my back for who knows how long. But this? This confirmation that she saw me as nothing more than a placeholder until something better came along? That broke me in a way I didn't think was possible. I took a step back, suddenly feeling like I didn't even recognize the woman standing in front of me. So that's it, I said, my voice hollow. You're leaving. You've already made up your mind. She didn't answer right away. She just stood there, her lips pressed into a tight line, her hands fidgeting at her sides. And then, finally, she sighed. It's just easier this way, she said. You deserve someone who makes you happy. And I deserve this. This. The money. The lifestyle. The security that came with being with a man who could give her everything she wanted without having to work for it. That I stared at her, trying to find the woman I had fallen in love with, trying to understand how she had become this. But there was nothing left to see. The Emily I knew was gone. That I nodded slowly, the weight of it all settling in. Okay. She blinked. Okay? You want this? Fine. My voice was steady, even as my insides burned. But don't expect me to make it easy for you. Her eyes narrowed slightly, cautious. What do you mean? I mean, I said, if you're going to throw everything we built away for some rich old man, don't expect to walk away from this clean. You want to leave? You want your new life? Then you'd better be ready for everything that comes with it. She didn't respond. But I could see it in her face, the realization that I wasn't going to just quietly step aside and let her waltz into her new life without consequences. That I wasn't done yet, and neither was this story. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a tight line, her eyes locked onto mine as if she was trying to figure out her next move. For the first time, I saw it clearly. She wasn't panicked because she was caught, she was panicked because she hadn't expected me to react like this. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't throwing things, I wasn't breaking down. I was looking right at her, and she knew I wasn't going to make this easy for her. She had played her game so carefully, spinning her web of lies, getting everything in place, and in her mind, I was supposed to be the clueless husband who never saw it coming. But now that I had seen it, now that I knew, she was standing in front of me trying to adjust, trying to regain control of the situation. That I let the silence stretch, waiting to see what she would do, how she would try to talk her way out of this, what angle she would take now that her initial lies had failed. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, but the longer I waited, the more I saw her confidence start to crack. And then, she sighed. A deep, heavy sigh, like I was the one making this difficult. Look, she started, rubbing her temples as if this was all just too exhausting for her. I don't want to fight about this. I was going to tell you, I didn't want to hurt you. I laughed. I couldn't help it. A real, bitter laugh that made her eyes widen slightly. You didn't want to hurt me? I repeated, shaking my head. Emily, you've been sneaking around behind my back with a 60-year-old millionaire for months. You've been taking his money, letting him buy you things, telling him you want to wake up next to him instead of me. But now you're concerned about my feelings? She exhaled sharply, her eyes darting away for a second before locking back onto mine. You don't understand. It's not that simple. No, it's very simple, I shot back. You wanted money. You wanted luxury. You wanted this, I gestured around the room, but with someone who could afford to give you more. So you found yourself a rich old man to take care of you. And instead of telling me the truth, you strung me along until you were ready to leave. She flinched, just barely, but I caught it. I wasn't stringing you along, she muttered. I just needed to make sure things were secure before making any decisions. Secure? I repeated, my stomach twisting. You mean, before making sure he was actually going to take care of you? She didn't deny it, that silence said everything that I felt. Something inside me snap. Not rage, not devastation, just clarity. This woman, the one I had loved, the one I had trusted, the one I had built a life with, had been looking at me like an option this entire time. She hadn't just fallen into an affair. She had planned this. She had calculated her moves, weighed her choices, and decided I wasn't enough. And now, she wasn't even trying to deny it. That I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Tell me the truth, Emily. How long have you been seeing him? She hesitated again, her arms tightening around herself. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. She sighed, rolling her eyes slightly, like this was just another inconvenience. Fine, she said, her voice clipped. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year. Half a year of coming home to me, kissing me, laughing with me, lying to my face while she was his. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. And all those business trips? The ones you said were for work? She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. I nodded slowly. And the bracelet? She hesitated just a second too long. A gift, she muttered. A gift, I repeated. From your mentor. She finally looked away. I took a deep breath, forcing the anger back down because I wasn't done yet. I needed to hear it all. Tell me something else, I said, my voice lower now. What was the plan, exactly? You were just going to stay here until he offered you something better? Until you were sure he'd take care of you? She bristled slightly, straightening her posture. I didn't use you, if that's what you're implying. No? I tilted my head. So what do you call it? Her lips pressed together, her fingers fidgeting slightly at her sides. I was waiting for the right time to tell you. Right time, I muttered. Right time for who? She looked at me now, her expression shifting, frustration creeping into her features. Do you want me to say I'm a terrible person? That I'm the villain here? Is that what you want? I let out another bitter laugh. I don't need you to say it, Emily. I already know. She exhaled sharply, turning away from me, running her hands through her hair like I was the one exhausting her. And then, she muttered under her breath, you act like you're so perfect. Like you never did anything wrong in this marriage. I froze. She turned back to me now, her eyes narrowed, her stance shifting like she was ready to fight. Maybe if you actually listened to me for once, maybe if you paid attention to what I wanted instead of assuming you were enough, we wouldn't be here right now. I stared at her. So this is my fault? She didn't answer right away. She just crossed her arms tighter, pressing her lips together, her jaw tight. But I saw it. The way she needed to shift the blame, to justify what she had done, to make herself feel better about it. That I took a step closer, lowering my voice again. You had a choice, Emily. You could have told me you weren't happy. You could have talked to me. But instead, you lied. You cheated. And now, you're standing here trying to make it my fault? She swallowed, but her expression didn't soften. It's not just black and white, she muttered. No, I said. It's not. But this? What you did? That's pretty damn clear. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then, finally, she spoke. So what now? I exhaled, the weight of it all crashing down on me. Now, I said, my voice steady, you make a choice. Her brows furrowed slightly. You can pack your bags and leave, I continued, my tone sharp. Go live your dream life with Richard. Go have your luxury, your security, your more. But if you stay, you don't get to pretend this never happened. You don't get to rewrite the story to make yourself the victim. She swallowed again, her throat bobbing slightly. I saw it, the fear creeping in. Because now, the choice was hers. And for the first time, I wasn't letting her control the narrative. She didn't answer, but I could tell she wasn't ready for what was coming next. She stood there, silent, her arms still crossed, her lips pressed together so tightly they were nearly white. I could see her breathing shift, the way her chest rose and fell just a little quicker, the way she blinked just a little too fast, her mind racing behind those careful eyes. She wasn't expecting this. She thought I'd break, that I'd beg, that I'd scream or cry or ask her why she did it, like I was some pathetic man who still believed he had something to save. But I wasn't playing that role. Not anymore. I had given her a choice, and now she had to face it. She had to own it. And from the look on her face, that scared her more than anything, she exhaled sharply through her nose, shaking her head as if trying to shake off whatever thoughts were clawing at her. She started, then stopped, then exhaled again, tilting her head back like she was searching for some way out. I need to think. Think about what? I said flatly. She blinked, caught off guard by how quickly I shut that down. I don't know, okay? This is a lot. I let out a dry laugh, stepping back slightly, giving her just enough space to make her feel the weight of it. This is a lot. I repeated, shaking my head. Emily, you've been lying to me for months. You've been sneaking around, taking his money, planning a future with him while you slept in my bed. And now you need time to think? Her jaw clenched, her eyes flashing with something that looked like anger, but I knew it wasn't directed at me. She was angry because I wasn't giving her what she wanted. She was angry because I wasn't reacting the way she had planned. She was angry because, for the first time in this entire mess, she wasn't the one in control. You're acting like I wanted to hurt you, she snapped suddenly, her voice sharper now, frustration bleeding through. Like I planned this just to ruin everything. I stared at her, my face completely blank, waiting for her to hear her own words, to let them settle, to let the absurdity of what she just said sink in. Didn't you? I asked finally, her lips parted slightly, but nothing came out. She swallowed, her eyes flickering to the side for just a second before snapping back to me. It wasn't like that, she muttered. Then what was it like? She shook her head again, running a hand through her hair, tugging at the ends, her frustration growing. I wasn't happy, okay, she admitted, her voice tight. I felt stuck. I felt like we were in this routine, like everything was just the same. And then I met Richard, and I held up a hand, stopping her. Don't, I said, my voice calm, controlled. Don't try to justify this by blaming our marriage. If you were unhappy, you could have talked to me. You could have told me. But you didn't. You just left. You just didn't bother telling me you were gone. Her face twisted slightly, something flickering behind her eyes, but I didn't know if it was guilt or just the frustration of being cornered. It wasn't that simple, she said quietly. It was, I said. You just didn't want it to be. Silence. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, biting her lower lip, her mind still racing. I could see it all over her. The way she was calculating, trying to figure out the best way to get out of this with the least amount of damage. She didn't love me. That much was obvious now. Maybe she had once, maybe she had convinced herself she did even while she was sneaking off with him, but in the end, it didn't matter. Love wasn't supposed to be conditional. Love wasn't supposed to be something you traded in for a better deal. And that's exactly what she had done. She looked at me again, and for the first time since this conversation started, I saw hesitation. Real hesitation. I wasn't sure what she was thinking, if she was actually reconsidering or if she was just afraid of what leaving would really mean. Maybe in her head, she had imagined it all so clean. She would leave, I would be heartbroken, and Richard would sweep her away into a new life where she never had to look back. Maybe she thought I would be the fool who let her go without a fight, who cried and begged and made it easier for her to walk away. But I wasn't doing that. And now, she was realizing how real this was. How real the consequences of what she had done were. She let out a shaky breath, rubbing her arms. "I need time," she said again, softer this time that I tilted my head slightly. "For what?" Her lips pressed together. "To figure out what I want." I let out another laugh, shaking my head. "You already know what you want, Emily," I said. "You just didn't think you'd have to actually say it out loud." She swallowed. "Go," I said, my voice quiet but firm, her brows furrowed. "What?" "Go," I repeated. "Go be with him. If that's what you want, if that's what you've already chosen, then go." She stared at me, her expression unreadable now, her fingers fidgeting slightly like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she let out another breath, nodding slowly, her gaze lowering just slightly. And then, finally, she turned that I didn't say anything as she walked away. I didn't move as she grabbed her purse, her keys, the few things she must have already decided she would take. And then, just as she reached the door, she hesitated, glancing back at me one last time. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice quiet, like she thought that would somehow make it better that I didn't respond. I just stared at her, waiting, letting her sit in the silence, in the weight of what she had done. And then, without another word, she opened the door and stepped out, leaving it all behind, and just like that, she was gone. That I didn't sleep that night. Even after Mark left, even after I sat there for hours staring at the empty space where Emily's things used to be, I couldn't shut my mind off. My body was exhausted, drained, but my thoughts wouldn't let me rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Every time I let my guard down for even a second, I heard her voice. It wasn't that simple. I needed to make sure things were secure. "I never meant to hurt you." Lies. Every word. Every excuse. Every pathetic attempt at making herself feel better for what she had done. I had given her a choice, and she had made it. She had walked out that door, without hesitation, without looking back. And now, I had to figure out how to exist in a life that didn't include her. I got out of bed before the sun even came up. There was no point in lying there, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of it all crush me. The house was too quiet. Every room felt bigger, emptier, like I had stepped into some alternate version of my life where nothing made sense. I wandered through the kitchen, opening cabinets, closing them again, trying to go through the motions of a normal morning. Coffee. Breakfast. Something to make me feel like I had control over something. But nothing worked. Everything felt foreign. That I grabbed my phone. No messages. No missed calls. No apologies. Not that I expected one. That I didn't even know what I would have done if she had called. Would I have picked up? Would I have let her try to explain herself again, listen to whatever new lie she had prepared? Or would I have just let it ring, let her sit with the silence the same way I had to sit with the reality she had left behind? It didn't matter. She wasn't coming back. She had everything she wanted now. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. Sitting in that house, surrounded by memories of a life that didn't exist anymore, it was suffocating. I grabbed my keys and walked out, not even sure where I was going, just knowing I had to move. The air was cold, biting, but it felt good. It felt real. I drove with no destination in mind, the city blurring past me as I tried to quiet the thoughts screaming inside my head. At some point, I ended up at a bar. It was empty, barely anyone inside except for a bartender and a couple of guys who looked like they had been there since morning. I slid onto a stool, ordered a drink, stared at the counter. I wasn't even sure why I was there. Drinking wasn't going to fix anything. It wasn't going to make me forget. But for the first time since last night, I felt like I wasn't drowning. Halfway through my second drink, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, expecting Mark, maybe someone else checking in. But it wasn't. It was Emily. I just stared at the screen, my pulse picking up, my breath catching in my chest. She had texted me. After walking out, after everything, she had actually reached out. And for a second, just 1 second, I felt something stupid and weak inside me spark, some pathetic part of me that wanted to believe this was an apology. That she had realized she made a mistake. That she was sitting in some expensive penthouse with her rich old man and feeling regret. Then I opened the message. Hey. Can we talk? No apology. No remorse. Just that I clenched my jaw, staring at the words, my grip tightening around the phone. My first instinct was to delete it. To ignore it. To not give her the satisfaction of a response. But something in me needed to know. I needed to hear whatever excuse she was about to give, to see if she would actually own what she had done or if this was just another way to twist the knife. I didn't reply. I finished my drink, ordered another, let the message sit there like a dead weight in my pocket, then my phone buzzed again. Please. Just one conversation. I let out a slow breath, staring at the screen, my chest tight. I could ignore it. I could block her, erase her, move on without ever giving her another second of my time. But I wasn't done yet. Not yet. So I typed out 2 words, where. She responded almost instantly. I'll come to you. I stared at the message, my pulse a steady, angry rhythm in my ears. Fine. Let her come, let her say whatever it was she needed to say, and then, I would decide if this was the last time I ever saw her again. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe I thought she would show up looking guilty, looking like someone who had just thrown away everything we had and finally realized what she had done. Maybe I thought she would come in crying, saying she had made a mistake, begging me to take her back. Or maybe, deep down, I knew exactly how this was going to go, and that's why I was already bracing myself for it. I sat in the bar, staring at the door, my drink untouched in front of me. The place was still quiet, just the low hum of the TV in the corner, the occasional clink of glasses behind the counter. It gave me too much time to think. To let all of it settle in. I had spent the last 24 hours trying to process how my life had just been ripped apart, how my wife had stood in front of me and admitted, without hesitation, that she had chosen someone else. Not because she loved him. Not because I had hurt her. But because he had more. More money, more security, more power. That was what I wasn't enough for, and now, she wanted to talk. The door opened, and I saw her before she saw me. She stepped inside, scanning the room, her coat pulled tight around her like she was trying to shrink herself down. And for just a second I almost felt something familiar. That instinct to protect her, to comfort her. The same instinct that had made me believe, for years, that she was someone I could trust, someone who would never do what she had done. But that feeling was dead now. I had buried it last night when she walked out, her eyes met mine, and I saw it, the hesitation, the flicker of something in her expression that she tried to cover up just as quickly as it had appeared. She walked over, sliding into the seat across from me, smoothing down her coat, her nails tapping against the wooden table. She looked good. Not in the way I used to think she did, but in a way that told me she hadn't spent the night crying. She hadn't lost sleep over this. She had walked out of my life and straight into his without missing a beat, and yet, she was here. I let the silence sit, waiting for her to speak first. She exhaled, looking down at her hands, then back up at me. Thanks for meeting me. I didn't respond. She swallowed, shifting slightly. I needed to talk to you. To explain. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. Explain? I said, my voice flat. Emily, you made it pretty clear last night. What's left to explain? She frowned slightly, her fingers tightening around the edge of her coat. I don't want you to hate me. I stared at her, not sure if I had heard her right. She kept going, her voice careful, like she was trying to say the right thing, trying to pick the words that would make this easier for her. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you. And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I don't want you to walk away from this thinking I never cared about you. I let that sit for a moment, just staring at her, waiting to see if she was actually serious. Then I leaned back, exhaling slowly. You don't want me to hate you? I repeated. That's what this is about? Her brows pulled together slightly, like she didn't like my tone, like she thought this was supposed to be some kind of civil conversation where we could walk away on good terms. Emily, you lied to me, I said, my voice steady but sharp. You cheated on me for months. You planned a life with another man while you were still sleeping in my bed. And now, you're sitting here telling me that the thing you're most worried about is how I feel about you? She swallowed but didn't look away. It wasn't that simple, she said again, her voice quieter. I clenched my jaw. No, I said. It was. You had a choice, and you made it. You chose him. And the worst part isn't even that you cheated, it's that you didn't even have the decency to be honest about it. You just let me sit there, blind, thinking we had a future while you were already planning your exit. She looked down. I didn't know how to tell you. I scoffed. Right. Because lying was so much easier. Her jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw a flash of something else: defensiveness. Like she didn't like how this conversation was going. Like she thought I would sit here and reassure her, tell her it was okay, that I understood. I did love you, she said suddenly, her voice sharper now, like she needed me to believe it. I didn't do this to hurt you, she stopped, exhaled sharply, then shook her head. Richard can give me things I've never had. He can make sure I never have to worry about anything ever again. And I know you think that makes me some awful person, but I had to do what was right for me. I stared at her, feeling something in my chest twist, not with pain, but with realization. She actually believed that. She actually thought that was a good enough reason. She had justified this to herself so completely that she sat across from me now, not as someone who had betrayed her husband, but as someone who thought she had simply made the right decision for herself. And suddenly, I understood, she wasn't the person I thought she was, she never had been. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm, steady. You know what, Emily? I said. You're right. You should be with him. You should have your penthouses and your designer clothes and your diamonds and your security. Because that's all you've ever really wanted, isn't it? Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to deny it. But she didn't. I nodded, standing up, grabbing my coat. You don't have to worry, I said. I don't hate you. Because I don't care enough to. She blinked, caught off guard. What, you walked out that door last night, I continued, pulling my coat on. And that's the last time I'll ever let you hurt me. I hope you get everything you wanted, Emily. I really do. She just sat there, staring at me, her lips slightly parted, something shifting behind her eyes. Maybe she had expected me to fight for her. Maybe she thought this would be some emotional goodbye where I told her how much she meant to me, where I begged her to reconsider, where I told her I'd always love her, but she wasn't worth that. She had never been. I turned and walked out of the bar, stepping into the cold air, breathing in deep. And for the first time in months, I felt free.